Every morning was becoming a battleground in their home. As the sun peeked through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the breakfast table, the boy sat quietly, poking at his cereal with little interest. His mother, already in a rush to get ready for work, glanced at the clock and then at her son. "Come on, sweetheart, you're going to miss the bus again," she said, trying to keep her tone calm, though frustration was starting to creep in. He didn't answer. He simply kept staring down, shoulders stiff, his expression unreadable. "It's been 2 weeks now," she continued, placing his backpack by the door. "You used to love riding the bus. What's going on?" "I just don't want to take it," he mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "That's not an answer," she replied, walking over to him. "Is someone bothering you on the bus? Did something happen?" "No. It's fine. I just don't like it anymore." His words were flat, final, but unconvincing. There was a stubborn edge to his voice, one that made it clear he wasn't going to explain further. She sighed, torn between pressing the issue and letting it go for now. Without further argument, he grabbed his bag and headed for the door. She watched as he walked off, choosing once again to go on foot. It made no sense. The school was a good 20-minute walk away, and the mornings were still chilly. He wasn't the type to enjoy long walks, let alone ones that made him late. Something wasn't right. She felt it in her gut, the way mothers often do when things aren't adding up. He wasn't just being stubborn, he was hiding something. The worry lodged itself deeper in her mind each day he refused the bus. And as she watched his small figure disappear down the sidewalk, she knew it was time to find out the truth for herself. The days dragged on, and the routine stayed the same. Each morning, the boy found some excuse to avoid the school bus. It's too loud, the driver's mean, or just a tired shrug that said more than any words could. But none of those reasons felt real to his mother. She had always been able to read her son, yet lately, he was like a closed book, and that unsettled her more than anything. She began paying closer attention. She watched how he avoided eye contact when she mentioned the bus, how his mood shifted the moment it was brought up. He wasn't acting like a kid trying to skip school or avoid homework. He was serious, thoughtful even, but distant. There was a quiet sadness in his eyes he tried to mask with quick responses and forced smiles. That look stuck with her all day, even at work. In the evenings, she tried again. "You know you don't have to walk, right? It's cold out there, and I worry about you," she said one night as they cleared the dinner table. He nodded but said nothing. She tried a different angle the next day. Was there an argument on the bus? Someone being mean? He paused for a split second, just long enough for her to catch it, then shook his head. "No, Mom. Just drop it." The firmness in his tone wasn't disrespectful, but it was final. It wasn't anger, it was protection. But from what? That was the question that gnawed at her constantly now. By the end of the week, her concern had grown into quiet anxiety. She found herself lying awake at night, running through every possibility. Bullying. A bad incident with the driver. Was he avoiding someone? Or worse, was something happening on the walk that she didn't know about? Her instincts were screaming at her. Something was going on, and her son was too proud, or too scared, to share it. It wasn't just about a school bus anymore. It was about trust, about her son trying to shoulder something on his own. And that realization hurt. By the end of the second week, the mother had reached her limit. Her concern had shifted into a restless determination that wouldn't let her sit still. Each morning brought the same script, her son insisting on walking, offering clipped, unconvincing answers, and her being left behind with a mind full of unanswered questions. She didn't want to invade his privacy, but something in her heart kept telling her that this wasn't just a phase or simple teenage moodiness. Something was being hidden, and it was time to find out what. That night, while folding laundry in the living room, she quietly made her plan. It was simple. Tomorrow morning, she would follow him. Not confront him, not embarrass him, just watch from a distance, silently, carefully, without him knowing. She needed to see for herself where he was going, what he was doing, and maybe, finally, understand why he had been so secretive. The next morning, she woke up a little earlier than usual. She didn't mention the bus. Instead, she acted as if nothing was different. She packed his lunch, placed his favorite granola bar in the side pocket of his backpack, and smiled at him when he walked into the kitchen. He looked tired, like always, but he seemed relieved that she didn't bring up the bus again. When he left the house, she waited a minute, then grabbed her keys and slipped into her car, staying far enough behind that he wouldn't notice her following. Her heart pounded as she drove slowly, keeping her distance, eyes fixed on the small figure ahead. He walked with purpose, not dragging his feet or lingering at corners. It didn't look like he was avoiding something, it looked like he was heading toward something. As she followed from a block behind, carefully stopping at intersections and ducking behind parked cars when necessary, her mind was racing. Was she doing the right thing? Was this crossing a line? Still, her instincts wouldn't let her turn around. She needed to know. Whatever this was, whatever secret her son was keeping, today she would uncover it. The boy walked with quiet determination, his backpack bouncing lightly against his back with each step. The morning air was crisp, nipping at his cheeks, and a thin fog lingered on the edges of the sidewalk. His mother followed slowly behind, her car crawling at a cautious pace, careful not to draw attention. She kept her distance, stopping whenever he glanced over his shoulder, ducking behind a tinted windshield and gripping the steering wheel with tense fingers. From her vantage point, she studied his movements. He didn't look anxious or scared, if anything, he seemed focused, like someone on a mission. He passed the usual bus stop without so much as a glance, even though the yellow school bus was parked there, students climbing aboard. The driver waved at him out of habit, but the boy didn't respond. He just kept walking, head down, hands in his pockets, steps steady. She furrowed her brow. He wasn't just avoiding the bus, he was deliberately choosing this longer, colder, more exhausting route. But why? He took a turn down a quiet residential street, one that didn't lead directly to the school. This puzzled her. She had always assumed he walked the main road all the way, but clearly, this wasn't a straight shot to campus. Her concern deepened. Was he meeting someone? Trying to stay hidden? Her thoughts ran wild with every step he took off the expected path. A few minutes later, she saw him slow down near a modest, one-story house with a ramp instead of stairs leading to the front door. He stopped at the gate, looked around briefly, then opened it and disappeared into the yard. She instinctively pulled over and parked behind a van, leaning forward, eyes wide with curiosity and confusion. She didn't move right away. She just sat there, staring at the gate he had vanished through, wondering what he could possibly be doing. Every theory she had built up in her mind, bullies, bus trouble, rebellion, suddenly seemed inadequate. Something else was going on, something she hadn't even considered. Her hands trembled slightly as she waited, holding her breath, knowing she was about to see something that would change everything. A few minutes passed before she saw movement again. Her son emerged from the gate, but he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was another boy, slightly smaller, with short dark hair and a light blue backpack resting on the back of a wheelchair. Her son was behind him, gently gripping the wheelchair's handles, carefully maneuvering it down the ramp and onto the sidewalk. The sight caught her completely off guard. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the two boys, her breath catching in her throat. They didn't speak much, but their coordination was smooth, as if this had become a practiced routine. Her son adjusted the straps on the other boy's backpack and then tapped his shoulder lightly, offering a small smile before continuing to push the wheelchair down the street. The boy in the chair glanced back and smiled in return, a quiet exchange that spoke volumes. She was stunned. All this time, she had assumed the worst, bullying, anxiety, avoidance, but here was the truth. Her son wasn't running from something. He was running to something. Every morning, while she worried and wondered, he had been showing up for someone else, helping a classmate who clearly couldn't get to school on his own. And he hadn't said a word about it. He hadn't asked for praise or recognition. He hadn't mentioned the extra time it took or the burden of waking up earlier to make the detour. He had simply done it, quietly, consistently, without fanfare. There was something profoundly moving in that, something that pierced straight through her heart. As they continued down the sidewalk together, her son slowed his pace over bumps and cracks, checking frequently to make sure his friend was comfortable. They moved in unison, their journey marked by a quiet companionship and the kind of care that can't be taught, only felt. Her eyes welled with tears as she sat silently behind the wheel, overwhelmed by the truth she had just witnessed. The boy she thought was hiding something shameful had instead been carrying a secret of pure kindness. She had come seeking answers and found something far more beautiful than she ever expected. She remained in her car, watching from a distance as the boys made their way down the sidewalk. Her hands rested limply in her lap now, no longer gripping the steering wheel. The tightness in her chest, the anxiety that had built over days of uncertainty, was slowly giving way to something else, something warm, heavy, and emotional. She felt stunned, but not in a way that hurt. It was the kind of surprise that left her humbled, small in the best possible way, like witnessing something sacred. Her son continued walking beside his friend, gently guiding the wheelchair over uneven patches of sidewalk, pausing at every curb, glancing both ways before crossing. There was no rush in his step, no sign of impatience. Just quiet purpose. She realized, then, how carefully he must have mapped this route, where the ramps were, which sidewalks were easiest to navigate, the timing needed to get to school without being late. It wasn't random. It was thoughtful. Every step of his refusal to take the bus had been a deliberate choice to help someone who needed him. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she even realized they'd begun to fall. She quickly wiped them away, not out of shame but from sheer emotional overflow. She was overwhelmed with pride, love, and an aching sense of guilt for ever doubting him. The silent, stubborn defiance he'd shown each morning hadn't been rebellion, it had been dedication. She'd been so focused on what was wrong, she hadn't seen what was right in front of her. Her son was growing into a young man of quiet strength and compassion. As they disappeared from view, turning the final corner that led to the school's back entrance, she let out a shaky breath. She stayed parked there for a while, trying to collect herself. Part of her wanted to run after them, to hug him, to say how proud she was, but something held her back. This wasn't about her. This was his moment, his choice, his private act of kindness. And she understood now why he hadn't told her, because it wasn't about being seen or praised. It was about doing what felt right, even when no one was watching. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel and closed her eyes for a moment. Her son, who she'd once worried was pulling away from her, was actually becoming someone she deeply admired. In that quiet morning, on an ordinary street, she had witnessed something extraordinary. That evening, the air in the house felt heavier, not with tension, but with unspoken understanding. Dinner passed quietly, more so than usual. Her son sat across the table, eating without complaint, offering the occasional smile, unaware that his mother was seeing him differently now. She watched him, really watched him, not just as her child, but as someone who had been carrying a quiet truth on his shoulders without asking for anything in return. The dishes were done, the lights dimmed, and he was sitting in the living room now, sketching in the corner of his notebook like he often did when he wanted to be alone with his thoughts. She stood in the doorway for a few seconds before walking in and sitting down beside him. He looked up briefly, then returned to his drawing. She hesitated, fingers nervously interlaced. "I need to tell you something," she began softly. He glanced at her again, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "I followed you this morning," she said, her voice low but clear. He blinked, surprised. "You, what?" "I didn't mean to invade your space," she said quickly. I was worried. You kept refusing the bus and wouldn't tell me why. I thought maybe something bad was happening." He looked down at his notebook, the pencil resting still in his hand. "I saw you," she continued, voice trembling slightly. "I saw you pushing your friend in the wheelchair. I saw how careful you were, how kind. You've been doing it every morning, haven't you?" He was silent for a moment, his face unreadable. Then he gave a small nod. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked gently. He shrugged, still not meeting her eyes. "It's not a big deal." "Yes, it is," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "It's a very big deal." He finally looked up, his eyes filled with quiet sincerity. "He lives alone with his grandma. She's older, can't push him all the way. He used to miss school a lot. So I offered. I didn't want anyone to know because it's not something I did to be noticed. It just felt like the right thing." Her heart ached with love and pride as she listened. She reached out and placed her hand over his. "It is the right thing. And it's also something beautiful. You're a good person, and you've been doing something incredibly kind without anyone asking you to. That's rare." His face flushed slightly, not used to this kind of attention, but he didn't pull away. He just nodded again, quietly taking in her words. They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't awkward. It was warm, shared, filled with the kind of understanding that deepens the bond between a parent and child. She had worried for so long that something was wrong, but now she saw clearly. He wasn't hiding out of fear or shame. He had simply been doing what was right, quietly, humbly, with a heart far bigger than she'd realized. The next morning, everything felt different. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and orange, and the quiet rhythm of their morning routine seemed to carry a new energy. Her son sat at the table, eating breakfast in his usual calm, quiet way, but there was a small shift in his presence, a subtle ease in his shoulders, a hint of peace behind his eyes. Something had changed between them. The silence was no longer heavy with mystery, but comfortable and shared. She moved through the kitchen with a quiet smile, preparing his lunch, slipping in an extra granola bar, just like she always did. When she handed him his backpack, she paused for a moment, brushing her hand against his shoulder in a gesture that said more than words could. He met her gaze and gave her a faint, knowing smile. There was nothing more to say about what had passed between them the night before. She understood now, and that was enough for him. As he opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch, she followed him, this time not to spy, not to unravel a secret, but just to watch, fully aware of who he was and what he had chosen to do. From the doorway, she stood in silence as he made his way down the sidewalk. When he reached the corner, the gate to his friend's house opened, and the same boy in the wheelchair came out, a wide smile lighting up his face. Her son greeted him with a small nod and a wave, walking over to help adjust the straps on his backpack before gently taking the handles of the wheelchair. They started down the sidewalk together, side by side, two friends walking into the morning light. She stood there for a while, arms wrapped around herself, heart full. In that quiet moment, pride swelled in her chest, but not the kind born from achievements or trophies. This was a deeper pride, the kind that came from realizing your child had chosen to be good when no one was watching. She thought back to all the moments she had doubted, all the mornings she had asked questions he wouldn't answer. Now, the silence made sense. He hadn't been hiding something dark, he'd been protecting something good, something sacred and simple. As the boys disappeared from view, her eyes stung with tears again, but this time she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall. They were tears of admiration, of love, of quiet awe. Her son didn't ask to be recognized or rewarded. He didn't do it for attention. He had just chosen, in his own quiet way, to carry someone else's burden a little farther each day. She closed the door and leaned against it, smiling to herself. That morning, she didn't just see her son leave for school. She saw the kind of person he was becoming, strong, kind, and deeply good. And in that realization, she felt a peace she hadn't known in weeks. Her worry had finally given way to something far greater: pride, love, and the joy of truly seeing her child for who he was.